Okay, I'm trying.
Say what
So
now?
I'm trying to. This is a little like improv, right?
Yeah.
So it's yes and you always play off of, but yeah.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us. This is Real Estate One Take. I am David.
I'm Will. Welcome.
Just a quick reminder, this is a podcast for those business leaders, for those entrepreneurs who want more, who have heard and seen the accepted mainstream wisdom and think, man, there's got to be more to this.
Mm-hmm.
This is for those folks who are willing to go outside of those traditional streams and are looking for more.
Yeah.
And we're going to try something a little bit different. We're going to try an interview format. You guys know this is relatively new, so we're trying out a couple of different formats. I'm going to interview Will today, and so I'll give you a quick intro for him. He has been licensed for 11 years, has done right at 100 transactions during those 11 years as a real estate agent. In addition to that, he is by previous current profession an engineer. In addition to that, he has also flipped several homes, owns at least one Airbnb, I think
Yep.
currently, has owned more in the past. So he has his hand in a bunch of different ponds and a bunch of different pots, and is a good resource to talk about, think through starting, running, scaling a business, and then to also talk about multiple streams of income. Do you feel like I handled that intro well?
Yeah, that was good. Thank you. Thank you. So,
Um, yeah. So I'm just going to start off with some general questions. Um, what do you think after 11 years in the business, if somebody came to you and said, well, I want to start a business in one of the three to four fields that you have, what's like a couple of bullet points that they should really be thinking about or that they should really do first?
um, I would say, well, the big one is as an entrepreneur, you have to have a plan. I know that early on in my real estate career, I thought a plan was, I've got next month's mortgage payment in the bank, so let's get to work. And that works if you're moving from W-2 employer A to W-2 employer B. I think that's a harder process when you start talking about contract work, when you start talking about you know building a business that doesn't exist yet. Maybe you're operating in a new space. If you need to invest some money for a startup, like if you're thinking about food trucks or if you're thinking about Airbnbs, because it's more than just purchasing the home. You have to consider, how do you furnish the home? Who's going to help you furnish the home? Because I'll be honest with you, man, I don't have any creative bone in my body when it comes to interior decorating. Like, I reached out to some people that I really trusted, that some people that decorated their homes really well, and I was like, wow, can you help me? So, you gotta the capital thing is a huge consideration, and that's why you see so many startups. You see people in these sort of fundraising cycles, where whether that's fundraising online, whether that's selling shares of the business, or um, it is early on, it is capital intensive, so you have to have a plan from the capital standpoint of both how are you going to survive when there's realistically no money coming in, and how do you come up with the capital for starting that business. So I would say in an entrepreneurial space, especially in real estate, you've got to consider a really, really good plan. And I didn't have one early on. And we can probably go into that at some point, but I didn't have a great plan early on, and it caused some missteps and some things that I would have done differently, I think.
All right.
That's a big one.
So there's some really good nuggets there, and I want to come back to some of those points. The other thing I want to do is for people that are watching, I want to define some terms. So One of the things that drives me crazy is when people use super niche industry terms that I just don't know. Like I had somebody the other day ask me something, I forget, they used an acronym that I didn't know. And then when I said, can you explain what that is? They kind of acted like, oh, well, you should know what that is. So anyway, when we talk about capital, when we talk about it takes capital to run a business, like I'm going to give you a definition and you
Yep.
see how far off I am. So when you talk about it being capital intensive, is your butt better have some money to invest in it?
Yeah, but money is huge. Money is huge. But I think capital goes beyond that. There's relational capital, right? So if you don't have the money, that's okay. There's a lot of people that have started businesses without money.
Hmm.
And the way that you start without money is you find somebody with money, and that takes relational capital. So that just takes your ability to have a relationship and be able to communicate your vision to somebody else who probably, who somebody else who has capital, whether that's a bank or whether that's a rich uncle or whether that's a good friend. So, capital comes in a lot of shapes and sizes. The most common one, especially entrepreneurial, is dollars, dollar bill.
Yeah.
So it takes green to survive, to to get the wheels turning. I mean, it takes time, and time is money as well. So time is also part of the capital. Um, so relational capital, time capital, and cash, and cash is probably the largest of the three. And then there's those second and third, and there's probably more that I'm not thinking of here, but
Yeah.
those
So
are the heavy hitters.
I've heard the
Cash.
term, I've heard the term sweat equity versus check equity.
Yeah.
So either have the time and the availability to put in the effort to build something or have the money to do it kind of thing.
Right.
If you find yourself in a position where you don't have a lot of check equity, you don't have a lot of cash to put into a business, you probably need to find a business that would allow you to do sweat equity. Not every business is structured like that. So maybe that's a consideration. Are you thinking about opening, let's just say, a landscaping business, right? Well, there's going to be a significant expenditure up front for all the equipment associated with that. Do you have that? Can you borrow it? What's the cost to borrow it? I want to go back to planning. So you talked about we could do hours on planning, but when you say that you didn't plan well or you wish you could have planned better, what break that down a little bit?
I think at the time, I think my and I see entrepreneurs do this a lot on TV, and sometimes it works out for them. I see it from some of the people that I know that have attempted to start things, but sometimes as entrepreneurs, we can let our passions, get top heavy over our planning.
Hmm.
Okay. So if you let your passion get top heavy over your planning, then you can operate, emotionally. You can operate out of that passion to want to do something that's your own, to be your own boss, or whatever the fancy terms are, from the entrepreneurial spirit. But if you do that without that strong base of planning, then it's like a pyramid, an upside down pyramid, right? So your passion at the top, it's just going to tip that pyramid over. And I think that's the trouble that I got into was I didn't I had a plan in my head. The plan had no written goals. The plan had no written time frame. And so I said, okay, well, let's just execute this plan starting today. And it was just super top heavy. And it worked for a little while, and then we found out that we were going to have our first daughter. So it's like that's one of those, like, you didn't prepare for it. That was not part of the plan. We were down with the living on beans and rice in order to try to make it work.
Yep.
And then you add another mouth in there, and there wasn't enough margin to cover that extra mouth.
Yeah.
So, and that was true from a standpoint of how much money we had coming in to health insurance and to, all of these things that you think about when you start thinking about planning families and stuff. And we weren't really focused on family planning. I was focused on starting a business. And again, that top heavy passion
Yeah.
sort of overshadowed and sort of tipped us, because of that planning, that base of planning wasn't there.
I'm going to say a phrase. Like most things, like most things, success in any entrepreneur or business endeavor is both and. It's a combination of a bunch of different factors. You have the right person with the right passion, you have the right plan, it was the right environment, it was the right economic conditions, they were in the right geographic locations, they had the right support at home, they got a hold of the right people, they had the right relationships. It's like a bunch of different factors. Yeah. So you feel like it'd be an accurate statement to say no amount of passion can overcome lack of planning, but at the same time, the perfect plan, if it's not matched with the correct passion, it ain't worth a hill of beans. I'm saying that badly, but if that makes sense.
Yeah. They go hand in hand. I 100% agree with you. They go hand in hand. And I think trying to do one without the other is it is very difficult, and it handicaps you in some really, really measurable ways very early on. When the money is needed, when the capital is needed, when the energy level is needed, when you need those things, a bad plan will squash passion.
Yeah. All right. So some nuggets here. Capital is not just money. It's time. Right. It's relationships. It's maybe some skills.
Yeah. Skills. Both industry skills and soft skills.
Yeah. What are soft skills?
Soft skills, the ability to relate to your market, to the people that you're either trying to serve or trying to sell to. It's soft skills are over time something that normal folks should be able to develop in their day-to-day relationships over time.
Yeah, I would say, and I'm going to take off my interviewer hat and put on my friend hat for a second, because I've known Will for a long time. Will has probably some of the best soft skills. It's like people like Will more than they like me. If people know me and then they meet Will, they're like, man, David, you're all right, but I really like Will. Like, I'm not the likable one in the relationship here.
Come on.
All right. So we talked about soft skills. So, man, I don't want to go too far into planning and goal setting, because I could talk about that all day.
So I think that would make a really good topic for another one of these podcasts. I mean, we could go on for an hour easy on planning and goal setting.
I agree. All right. So let's talk about what if you could give a new business person. So, okay, we talked about advice for the brand new business person. Let's talk about what you might say to that person who is that intermediate or mid-level. So maybe they've tried something and failed. Maybe they're in the middle of trying something right now. Maybe they're 6 months to a year in. They're just having a hard time seeing results. And they're just like, man, I feel like I'm beating my head against the wall. Like, what are some bullet points you would give that person?
I would say, I mean, the first thing is do you care about what it is that you're doing, right? So I would say the first thing, and it really comes back to that passion, the point of passion that we talked about. First thing is measure your passion. Where is your passion? Where is something that you can do, sell, service that you can provide, where you feel like this is something that I know well, I enjoy doing, and I want to help other people do it or own it or whatever the case is. So being able to measure your passion, I think is a key, because it's really, really hard to do for a long time something that you're not passionate about.
Mm.
I can tell you from my experience is trying to pretend like I now don't get me wrong, I love the lifestyle that being an engineer has provided, and I love the relationships that being an engineer has provided, and I love the opportunity for travel that I've had. But what I have found out is, through more than a decade in the engineering space, is I don't truly feel like that I could make it another 10, 15, 20 years doing that. And so when you get burnt out at it, then you start looking at it in different lights, and then the passion dwindles, and then so the quality of your work dwindles. And when you're selling a service or a product, if that happens, then your business will dwindle. I mean, people will no longer want to, do the things with you that you were once starting or selling or building, what
Right.
service that you're providing. So first is measure your passion. Measure your passion. See, is it something that you think about a lot, that you have, that I'm just describing myself here a little bit, but that you dream about, that, like, when you're riding down the road and random thoughts come in your head, like those are the type of thoughts that come into your head.
Yeah.
Like if it's something that's like part of who you are, then that's something that you should latch onto. If you have that drive to do something entrepreneurial, you need to make sure that you have a passion to do it, because you want it to be something that is sustainable itself over a long period of time. And the only way that can happen is if you really, really care about it. You care about the people that you're serving, you care about the service that you're providing.
So somebody, it's a motivation, right? Are you getting into it because you think you're going to make a lot of money in it, or are you getting into it because you actually care about it? And does it, I don't think it has to be black and white. It doesn't have to be I'm totally altruistic or I'm totally money driven. Probably it's a mix of both at the same time somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I think if I can speak super candidly on this podcast, and I'm not sure who all is listening, it's probably going to shock some folks that are listening, and that's okay too. Is when I was 20 something, I thought if I could just achieve a level of income that was like this number, then when I got there, man, life is going to be simpler. Life is going to be more full. Life is going to be more lavish. Life is going to be, less worrisome. There'll be, and what I found out was I had placed my passion in that number. I'd placed my passion in that number. And when I got to that number, and frankly, when I exceeded that number by 20 or 30%, I still found that it wasn't satisfying. I and if you would have told the 21-year-old me or the 22-year-old me that this is how I would feel now here in my, in my mid 30s, I would not have believed you. I would have said that's just something that people say. That's just older folks who are trying to put the younger folks down and make us, not chase after something, success in that light.
It's easy for them
But
to say because they already have that. They've already achieved it. So it's easy for them to say that kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. And when I got there, I was like, I didn't feel different. I didn't feel different. I didn't. It was shocking. It was shocking. It was like it was almost like I could describe it like a midlife crisis, but I was, you know, early 30s,
Quarter life
you
crisis.
know. Yeah. And I'm thinking to myself, they were right. All the folks that said like, hey, you chase that number. Yeah, I mean, it's the lifestyle. It's going to provide you a different lifestyle. That's true. But it wasn't fulfilling. And I see people who are at that level, and they seem to be fulfilled. And it just, I think, to me, it speaks very clearly that there are some folks who don't have the entrepreneurial spirit and don't mind the 9 to 5, climb the ladder, work hard, get promoted, get raises, get your bonus, go home and eat dinner, and then go on vacation in the summertime. There are people like that, and there's nothing wrong with that at all, right? If that is where you're at and what you like, go for that, do that. But for me, I thought that my passion was that ladder climb. And then once I climbed the ladder and I got where I thought I should feel different and I didn't feel different, I checked myself and said, it's this thing that I keep daydreaming about.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah. I think the thing that a lot of folks get into is they say, maybe I'll say it differently. The trap can be, well, I thought it was going to be X income or X money or X goal, but actually it's just X plus 20% or X plus 30%. That's actually going to make me happy. Or
You just move the goalpost. And so you spend your whole life moving the goalpost.
Yeah. And it's like, it's just not, man. Like, it's just not. I'm not saying that now let me put my real human hat on here for a second. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with having goals. You absolutely, if you have a family to provide for, man, go do it. Go figure out a way to do it. But at the same time, like, if that's your only motivation, okay, I'll say it differently. I've been in real estate myself for quite a few years, and the real successful people that stick. So by successful, what do I mean by successful? I mean longevity, healthy relationships, healthy family, healthy business relationships, complete package. Successful are folks who, I think the basic building block is they're just decent human beings first. People who aren't decent human beings do not last in business. Why? Because it's so freaking relational. It's so relational that if you can't be a decent friend and a decent human being, it's just really hard to make it work otherwise, man. And maybe that sounds kind of counterintuitive because you're thinking, well, there's all these bad stereotypes about business people, yada, 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 crooks, this, that, or the other. I'm telling you, man, a lot of that stuff's not true. A lot of that stuff's not true. I'm not saying that people are perfect. I'm not saying people are perfect. But at the same time, you take somebody who builds a reasonably successful business, and I would say 9 times out of 10, they're going to have some principles, typically faith-based principles, that allowed them to make, that guided them through their decision-making process. And over a long period of time, typically, there's no such thing as overnight success either. Over a long period of time, they were able to build a repeatable, sustainable, scalable business.
Right.
What is some advice, some mainstream advice out there? The gurus are saying that you hear on a regular basis, either now or when you started, that you disagree with, that you found not to be true.
Do you mean in the industry or just in general?
Just in general, like, hey, if you want to be a successful business person, you got to do X, Y, Z, or you got to spend money on this, or you got to just in general.
I would say the one that kept me up at night for many, many years had nothing to do with business. It had to do more with the responsibility to your family. Right? That I had folks in my life that said, hey, the not sure thing is not safe, it's not responsible, it's not putting your family first, it's all of these reasons why not to do something, to start something of my own, right? All reasons why not to give birth to a really good idea. Again, going back to with a good plan, with a good foundation, with good relationships, and both business and personal relationships, with good advice from people that you trust and people that share similar similar not similar thought processes, but similar foundational beliefs, right? But the advice, some of the advice that I got, and I have just a couple, just I want to spend just a couple minutes here because this is something that's changed over the past few years. Having a conversation with my dad specifically, all right, and my dad always said, whenever I started talking about, hey, I really feel this just draw to do my own thing and to work, to dig real hard and, and to be successful in something that I built. And his response initially, for years and years and years, and I hope if he sees this, he's not offended. He's flattered. But for years and years and years, his response was, boy, you got a good job. You got a family to worry about. You got responsibilities. Now you're a grown man and you can do what you want to do, but we all know what that means. We all know what that means. As a young man, David, if your dad said, now you can do what you want to do, what does that mean? I want you to do what I'm suggesting that you do.
It means that your idea is a bad idea. You can go do that if you want, but I do.
Exactly. And for years, man, it was, you got a good job, you got benefits, you got an education that got you there. Like, you got it. Just do that because it's the sure thing. You got a family to consider. It was almost, it wasn't telling me that I was selfish, but it was really insinuating that doing this was more selfish than trusting a W-2 paycheck.
Yeah.
And I had the same conversation with him last year. We've had it a couple of times since then. And in the years, my dad has moved on from his company and retired. And my dad's generation is the generation of, you go to work, you commit to a company, you do exactly what you're asked to do, you do as much more as you can, you get promoted, you find favor with management, you put in 30 years, and then you can retire successfully. And that honestly scared the hell out of me. Like, I didn't want to.
Spend 30 years. Yeah, spend 30 years doing what you don't want to do so that you can spend 20 years of retirement doing what you do want to do, kind of thing.
Right. Exactly. And hopefully you hadn't done damage to your body stress wise and being sedentary, and your cardiovascular health is low because you're fat and stressed out all the time. And hopefully you get 20 years when you retire, but the same conversation has happened many years since then, but last year the conversation was a little different. And I'm going to be emotional here, so I'm trying not to be, but I had a similar conversation with my dad, and told him that, hey, I that it's the same conversation I shared here. Is I felt like when I achieved that echelon, like, I got it under control, everything's good, life is easier, worries go away. And I shared with him the same thing I'm sharing with you guys, is that just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. It wasn't that satisfaction. And I was telling my dad about that, and his response was something to the effect of, well, maybe that life is just not for you. And maybe there's something bigger. and maybe there's something, and his, one of his things he said, because we were talking about this, me venturing out into Airbnbs and doing renovations, and he's seeing some of the success that we've had. And I don't know if it's the success. I don't know if it's him changing positions now that he's retired, looking back and just being reflective over his career. But the response was more, who am I? Who am I to tell you what you should be doing? Like if that's where you're being fulfilled, and your W-2 paycheck is not fulfilling you, and you're being fulfilled in doing these projects and acquiring this real estate, and making successful rent rolls and closing homes, closing deals, and putting families in houses and helping veterans, and if these are the things that you're talking so passionately about, who am I? Who am I
There
to
you
tell you
go.
not to do that? And so we had some conversations, and he did mention to me once that, I have thought since I've been retired, and he said, now I'm retired, and there's not a lot I could do about it. I have thought how my life would have been different if I had chose a different path.
Sure.
And like that was like the break in the dam, man. I started crying. I just like busted out crying, because I'm thinking, like, I don't want to be there. And if I follow this advice that says, hey, put in that 30 years and punch out and go home, and you have a nice little retirement. If I'd have followed that, then I would be sitting in the same spot that he's sitting in, looking back, thinking, what could I have accomplished?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and I think about the generational aspect of it comes up as well, because it's like, first off, every generation throughout history, there's like, you could Google this, there's proven facts, there's like written records in Greek and Roman society of them talking crap on the following generation, by the way. So this is nothing new.
Yeah.
And you might catch me saying this about people younger than me, but
I'm already saying this about Nicki Minaj.
But there seems to be like a generational difference between the expectation of, this employer is going to stick with me for 25, 30 years. Whereas now, I think that trade-off between, like, that's the dream, to find something that you're barely okay or okay with doing. If you love it, that's good, but that's not really the expectation. Find something that's tolerable to do for 20, 30 years, so that you can then retire and do what you really want to do for the second half of your life. And it's like, well, there's a lot. You got to think about what happens during that first 25, 30 years. Probably have small children. Your health is probably good. Like, your relationship with your spouse. There's just so much happening during that period of time that why, like, you don't have to be miserable, right? Like, you don't have to be miserable.
Yep.
And I say that for anybody, like whatever position you're in, you don't have to be. Does that mean, if you're listening to this thing, like, man, I got this business idea that's been rattling around in my head forever, but I'm not sure how to do it, or I'm working at this dead end job or in this profession, whatever, that I don't enjoy. I'm trying to do something different. I'm not saying that it's got to be a straight line path. You might have to make some changes. You might have to go all Dave Ramsey style and eat beans and rice for a little while to make it work. But I promise you, there is a way to make it work.
That's right.
There is a way to make it work. It may not be something your family has ever done before. It may not be something your friend group has done before. And that can be really challenging. That can be super challenging. I remember when I first got into real estate, there was that, where people were like, man, because it takes a minute to get your business up and running. And it was a year and a half period that was tight around the Carter household, and it was tight. And but now I would never ever go back. And I didn't come from a place of huge wealth. I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs, from anybody who had done it before. So people were like, nobody was super negative. Nobody said anything super negative, but I guarantee you people were watching. And I guarantee you people,
everybody they're all watching with their popcorn. Like, they want you to succeed, but they're, in the back of their mind, they're expecting failure. Like I'm not cheering for failure here, but I'm just sitting back. I'm just going to eat popcorn and we'll see how this thing goes.
But if it does turn into a train wreck, I want to be looking. I want to be
Exactly.
in the front
I'm
row.
going to be rubbernecking like crazy.
All right. So
No, but on a serious note, if you are considering making a jump into some entrepreneurial field, just first, do not do it top heavy with passion and no planning. Right? I've been there. I did that. It is stressful for everyone involved. So good planning. If you want to ask questions, you can reach us. You can reach us by email. We'd be more than happy to reach out to you and talk to you a little bit about planning. Whether maybe it's in real estate, maybe you sell dream catchers. I don't know. You make baskets down by the river. I don't know. Whatever you're doing, let's talk about a business plan. David, give them our email address.
It's real estate, the number 1take@gmail.com. So real estate 1take@gmail.com.
Yeah. Send us an email. We'd love to reach out to you to give you some pointers. We're not selling anything, but we'd love to interact with you.
I think that's going to be something I maybe haven't explained. Like, our intention is not to sell. We want to very specifically give away for free experience, knowledge,
right,
stories through content like this. I think there's a real value in first off, generosity. It's one of my really big principles and core values, but then in business as well, a rising tide lifts all boats kind of a concept. So we operate from a standpoint of abundance. There's not, more business for me is not less business for Will. Same thing. Like that's just not the case, man. It is not mutually exclusive.
More is more, man. More is more.
Success for some is success for everybody. The more dream catchers that person sells, the more houses they can buy. Right. So I'm all about that. I'm all about that. All right. I think that was all the questions. Let me look at my list here really fast. Man, you knocked that out of the park, by the way. Yes. Any final thoughts or words of wisdom?
I would say in the past, and I'll spend 30 seconds saying this, but in the past, I have been a measure twice. And you normally finish that with cut once, right? Measure twice, cut once. I have been in the past a measure twice, a measure two more times, a measure another time, a think about it, a measure four more times, and I never cut. I can say, and during the pandemic is when a lot of this changed. Now, whether it was the time of, whether it was just having more free time, whether it was having less supervision, I don't know exactly what it was, but I started measuring twice and measuring two more times, and then I finally cut. Right. And so what I'm getting at is the long and short, I planned, I evaluated the plan, I shared the plan with people that I trusted. I got advice from people that maybe necessarily are not always in agreement and alignment with me. That's another big thing. I re-reviewed the plan. I talked to my family and made sure that they were on board, and then I freaking cut. I spent so much time measuring and never cutting. So a good plan is not really good until it's executed. All right. So that's something to keep in mind. A good plan is not really good until it's executed.
Yeah, because you don't know. How can you evaluate it? You have no idea.
Right. So put together a plan and have it reviewed by people that you trust. Have it reviewed by people that don't agree with you. Review it with your family and then take the plunge. Take the plunge.
I love it.
If you have a good plan, then put it into action. Let's check it.
Here's a final question that just popped in my mind. On the reality side, has every business decision you've ever made been successful?
No.
If you had to give a batting average? What do you think your batting average is?
It's probably less than 500. Less than 500.
Y'all, I cannot tell you how common that is. I cannot tell you how common that is, from all the way from past presidents, Abraham Lincoln, all the way to successful businessmen. Typically, there is more failure than there is success.
Yeah.
Typically, there is more failure than there is success.
Yeah.
And how do you figure out what works and what doesn't? It's by at bats, man. It's by taking swings.
That's right. That's right.
By taking swings.
And it makes things a lot easier to accept the failure when you have a really good plan.
Yeah.
You know, like if you plan for something and you have a plan B, and plan A doesn't work and you can fall back to plan B, you have more energy, more emotional energy to invest on like a what we would call in project management space post-mortem. And that is, hey, this project is either dead or finished, and we had some things that we didn't do well. Let's pick it apart. That's the post-mortem. So if you fail and the plan, you didn't have like that fallback, you didn't have anything to protect you from let's say ruin, then you're going to spend a lot of energy trying to keep yourself out of ruin and less energy trying to learn from what you did that didn't work. Does that make sense?
I think so. I
want to make sure that people have the energy if it fails. Let's just say if it is failing, they still have the energy that they don't have to worry about like the mortgage payment coming due, that they can actually pick apart and say, what would I do differently next time? Rather than spending all the energy to figure out, oh my goodness, we gotta find that mortgage payment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, that goes back to planning. It really goes back to planning.
I want to thank you, Mr. Bowman, for letting me interview you, for being candid. Again, if you have questions, if you want to toss us a business plan, I would love to tear it apart. Remember, I'm not the nice one. Will is. Will be nice, but he will give you good ideas. I will be mean, but I would also give you good ideas. He reaches at realestate1take@gmail.com. We're also on YouTube and all the assorted social media platforms. We try to give good content. And again, it is all for free.
Yeah. So
Thank you, sir.
we would appreciate you guys. If you got something out of this, click the share button. Give us a comment on whatever platform that you're watching on, just to say thank you, or say, hey, I'm considering starting this. Thank you for the inspiration. Or, hey, I'm considering doing this, and based on what you said, I'm not quite ready. And or send us your business plan, whatever you want to do. We'd love to interact with you on whatever platform that you're working with.
Absolutely. I look forward to it. See you guys next time.